4 months ago, I decided to learn how to make games in Unity. This is my progress after 4 months. In early 2020, when the virus became serious, just like everyone else, I was forced to quarantine at home. And just like everybody else, I got really bored. So I decided to pick up an old hobby of mine, which was playing video games. I couldn't believe I ever stopped gaming, and I was actually pretty excited to catch up on all the great games I missed out on for the past few years. I like to think every gamer around this time was optimistic about being forced into isolation. But with a lot more free time on my hands, I decided to learn how to make games instead of just playing them. I was really inspired by melee combat games that require you to get good at them, skill-based games. At the time, I was playing games like God of War, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, and Jedi: Fallen Order. Large AAA titles, I know, but I really loved how their movement mechanics felt and how every attack, parry, and block felt so satisfying in the combat system, especially when you learned how to time them right and use them in combination. I didn't want to create these games of that size and scale because I just couldn't, obviously, but I just wanted to understand how the core mechanics of these games work, especially the fighting and the combat, and what makes them so satisfying. After researching and debating whether I should start with Unity or Unreal, I decided to go with Unity because it just seemed more beginner-friendly. I learned JavaScript when I was still trying out web development, and when I started to learn C# for Unity, it felt more like a refresher since it almost kind of looks the same, like almost. I watched a few tutorial videos on YouTube, and I think everybody gets started with game dev through Brackeys these days. Although I can't believe I just started just as he was retiring. Then I bought a cheap course on Udemy because I wanted to be more structured in my learning. The course was apparently the highest rated one on game dev in Udemy, and I learned so much for how cheap it was. The course taught me how to build simple 3D games from start to finish, and each successive game would build on the knowledge learned from the previous one. After finishing the course, I felt like I learned so much. However, I still didn't feel like I really knew how to build games on my own from scratch without a guide. So I started setting daily challenges for myself where I would build simple 3D games around a specific theme for that day, and I would only have about 3 hours to finish them. It was sort of like a mini personal game jam. I would finish some games, and some were way too ambitious for my skills at the time, but even if I didn't finish, I would learn new concepts and features about Unity and game design patterns by just pushing through each project. Sometimes I would extend the project for several days and see how far I could go until I hit a concept block, which I would need more time to study up on. I started getting addicted to the problem-solving aspect of game dev. I was especially fascinated by the physics system in Unity. So I kept daily, and then eventually I did weekly challenges. Until when I first heard the announcement for the Quest 2, I immediately pre-ordered it, and when it finally arrived in the mail, I became obsessed with VR. And would you look at that, it's even compatible with Unity. After I watched a few Unity VR tutorials, seriously, why do they all have thick French accents?
If you are interested in learning more, I will post an extra episode on my Patreon.
But they're all awesome. I decided to start making the type of game which inspired me in the first place. And with that came a huge problem. How do I make a sword fighting game when the sword literally feels like air and there's nothing to hit in real life? As somebody who did a bit of real life fencing, it just didn't feel right to me. And on top of that, the current move system just doesn't feel very intuitive, and it breaks the immersion even more in sword fighting. So when designing my VR game, I decided to address these two main problems first: the sword combat and the movement system. For the movement system, I created my own way of walking and running in VR. I basically used the position tracker of the headset and used that directional data to point to where I would move in the game, independent of where I was actually looking. That just means I could strive left, right, diagonally, or go backwards without ever having to look in those directions and having to press any buttons at all. What resulted was a movement system where I could freely swing my arms and turn my head while moving in any direction. So I solved my movement problem. The sword combat, however, I wanted to make my sword bounce along with my hand and arm whenever I tried to hit an enemy who was blocking. So it'd be just like in real life. This means that the weapon and my hand model would be momentarily detached from my controller, resulting in kind of an outer body experience. I thought this mechanic was kind of cool, so I want to implement it every time the player makes a mistake or tries to spam an attack. The player would lose control of his or her body and would have to reorient his or herself in order to recover. So it'd be like a punishment system if you try to spam an attack or attack at the wrong time. I tried doing this by attaching the arm model to an invisible joint when the arm detaches from my controller, and then applying an impact force to that arm. I'm still trying to figure this out, as you can see, but I'm gonna keep working on it until it feels right. And if you want to follow along on this game's journey, then welcome to the channel, where I try to upload at least once a week about my progress and about all the new insights and stuff I learned. Unity is really awesome, and I'm so thankful for all the information that's out there, especially the free ones. In terms of mistake, I think my biggest one is I would move from one project to another way too quickly. I find that I learn the most when I continue with one project and sit with one problem for a lot longer and try to at least push through it. I think these mistakes mostly stem from my impatience because I want to learn and finish projects as quickly as I can so I can move on to the next one. But now I tend to enjoy the struggling through the work. I just enjoy problem solving a lot more. It just makes game development so much more satisfying. I can't wait to see the progress I'm going to make a few months from now and how the game is going to look then. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. Like, subscribe, and hit notification bell to be updated on the progress. I'll see you guys. Peace.